How does art affect/lower stress in people ages 10 through 16 by Adelaide Stern? What's the big question? The question I am trying to answer is, how does art affect/lower levels of stress in people 9 through 11? Rationale. In the USA, stress is a major problem. It affects everyone, whether you are a student trying to meet deadlines, an adult trying to juggle a family and a career, or really just a person old enough to process our world, you have likely experienced stress. Stress on its own isn't necessarily a problem. It can motivate you and help you to comprehend the world around you. The problem is when stress is so high it is causing psychological discomfort. High stress can manifest physically in things such as high blood pressure, elevated heart rate, elevated cortisol, stomach aches, headaches, and more, like tensing up your jaw or raising your shoulders. Um, and it is always important to decrease psychological discomfort and physical discomfort. This experiment aims to lessen stress and its effects. Funk and Wagnalls. According to that, Funk and Wagnalls, stress is the body's emergency response to real or imagined danger. Any event, thought, or situation that causes stress is called a stressor. This is how scientists define stress. Stress is a response to some type of perceived danger. Experiencing stress has an effect on the body because the body thinks it is in danger. This is why my experiment is important. Art therapy is a therapy type where patients create art for a calming and therapeutic effect. This is proof that art is being used to decrease psychological stress in people already. Art therapy also involves a therapist in curated activities, whereas this experiment will just involve a set time and amount of art supplies. No prompt, no guidance. Previous experiments have been conducted on people similar to mine, have been conducted on people over the age of 18. These showed a decrease in cortisol levels, indicating that stress had been decreased. There are also different types of art, from painting and sketching to dance and creating music. This experiment will primarily focus on drawing using pencils and markers. The EEG is a monitoring method used to record the electrical activity of the brain. This experiment will use an EEG. The EEG uses receptors that can read brainwaves. It can also be used to read brain and heart rate. I used Sinha Clinic on their website. They include definitions of what the brainwaves each mean and like what to look for. So like increased alpha waves, which is something I looked for, would indicate relaxation. My hypothesis. My hypothesis is that if students participate in 15 minutes of art, then they will be less stressed. Participants will have a decrease in beta waves and an increase in alpha waves. These will indicate relaxation. The student will be relaxed. The independent variable is doing art, and the dependent variable is brainwave fluctuation. My procedure. I put the EEG, which is shown in the top photo, on the participants' heads, and after checking that the EEG was connected, I let the participants go back to their normal advisory time. For 15 minutes, they participated in advisory, which is the time frame I was using, as they normally would, doing homework and socializing. Most people were doing math homework on reflex math or talking to their friends. After the 15 minutes ended, I brought the participants with me to a quiet room where they drew for 15 minutes. The participants were encouraged to just be creative and not focus too much on if their art was good. After the 15 minutes ended, the participants removed the EEG, and that concluded the study. I did this until I had 9 sets of data. My data. So this shows first on the left, the beta, it's highlighted in green, as you can tell, I color coded it. Alpha is highlighted in white. On beta, you can see the standard deviation on both the control group and the experiment group, and then at the bottom, the result of the t-test. On alpha, you can see not the standard deviation, but you can see the p-value and t-test that I got the p-value from at the bottom circled in red. Standard deviation for both beta and alpha was below 2 for both beta and alpha, meaning that there wasn't any noise and my information wasn't null, which had been a possibility. I conducted a t-test on Excel and received a result of p-value 0, meaning that the results likely showed a connection between the experiment variable and the results, which helped me to look at the graphs on the next slide. The variable was art. My data continued. The decrease in beta waves, as seen on the chart, is representative of relaxation and decreased awareness. The chart shows an average of all the people who participated in the experiment as a line. The blue cortisol represents the experiment, and the red is the control group. So you can see there's a pretty significant decrease as far as it goes, because most of the time participants wouldn't go up more than 1 or 2 points during the experiment. Um, the decrease seen in the alpha waves was unexpected. The decrease shows that the participants averaged became less relaxed. This was unexpected and disproves my hypothesis. In future projects, I could specifically focus on alpha waves and what activities do show a decrease in alpha waves and what does not. So blue line is below the red for almost the entire experiment, um, which would say they are less relaxed. Yeah. Conclusion. Was my hypothesis correct? In one way, my research did support my hypothesis. I thought the beta waves would decrease, and they did. My hypothesis said that alpha waves would increase, but they did not. They decreased. This is interesting because it says participants were less alert, the decrease in beta waves, but not relaxed. Where can I go from here? What other questions can I ask, and what data could I collect? Since the main difference was in alpha waves, I could do further research on other relaxing activities, for example, walking or meditation, and see if there's a decrease in alpha waves or an increase. Other ideas to consider. Art might not be relaxing for everyone. The time I used could have been stressful because it was work time for the participants' students. The reason this might have been stressful is I was replacing what they would normally be using to get done homework or schoolwork and doing something different. The EEG might not have been collecting data correctly because I did not build the EEG, someone else did. I could be interpreting the data wrong, and the resources I used to learn what each brainwave meant and my understanding of that could also be incorrect. Assuming it's not, then like the things aren't wrong, then my hypothesis is incorrect, partially. Future questions could include: what would participants describe themselves as relaxed even if their brainwaves didn't represent that? Would others' analysis of the data give different results? Is the EEG correctly working? Am I correctly understanding the meanings of the brainwaves? If the experiment had been more controlled, would results have been different? If I changed a variable such as time or location, would I get different results? Is a decrease in cortisol experienced in cases where alpha waves do not increase? Is the increase seen in around the same point in both graphs significant? At the end of both graphs, they both kind of, the experiment group both kind of goes up at around the same point, and I was just wondering about that and what it could potentially mean. Challenges I experienced during this experiment. Originally, I was planning to use cortisol. Cortisol is one of the hormones representative of stress. I did a ton of research and work on this and did not end up being able to use it because of the cost and practicality of it. Microsoft Excel was a huge problem. It was very tricky to use and overall confusing. I previously hadn't used it to do such like complicated things, but I got the hang of it. Lots and lots of forms. I used minor human participants in my experiment, which takes a lot of forms, and which at first was very difficult for me because I struggled to focus on them, but I did overcome that. Understanding the data and creating an answer was another challenge because the data was confusing and I'd never looked at data similar to this before. I hadn't looked at data, period, before. So coming up with answers from the data was a lot more difficult than I expected it to be because it wasn't just written out for me to be like, okay, there's my answer. Time frame and when we could do all the testing was difficult to coordinate because I needed to figure out who I'd be using in my experiment and when they could just come sit and do art. Most people don't want to go sit and do art because they have more things to do. So this is my experiment. How does art affect / lower stress in people 9 through 11?